you've written a book, you've put your heart, you've put your soul into it, this is your baby, this is your child, you are proud of it. The one thing you need to do as an author is to take a step back and not just look at it in the loving way and all of the sweat, blood, and tears you put into it, but take a look at it as the consumer, as the reader, and ask yourself, what problem does this book solve? If it's a nonfiction book, it's an easy answer because it usually provides some sort of advice or counsel to them. If it's a fiction book, what sort of escape does that provide the reader? If I'm a reader of thrillers, does this solve my question of, is this a good thriller for me to read? And so looking at the cover design, looking at the product description, which isn't just an explanation of what the book is about, but it's sales copy that convinces that person that was drawn to your cover that they want to hit the buy button and they want to pick up this book now and start reading it. So thinking about things like that, looking at your metadata, looking at every single field, the title, the subtitle, the series title if that's applicable, the copy, the cover design, are putting that professional product in front of your audience and answering that question, how is this book going to make my life better?
My books are sci-fi, dystopian and paranormal thrillers. The Out of Orbit series is a dystopian science fiction. It follows a character called Georgiana. It's very much Hunger Games, Divergent, that sort of thing. I also have the Teeth series, which is the furthest you can get from Twilight that you can possibly imagine while still talking about vampires. Very gory, very gritty, quite funny. Just everything that people who don't like Twilight would love. My best advice to authors would be to take your time. Don't rush through everything just because you can. Take your time, make your books the absolute best they can be, and really focus in and get yourself a great brand to start off with.
I write science fiction dystopian, and my current series is called the Exelon 5 series. Essentially it's about two worlds. One is Earth, which is a dystopian Earth, and then there's another world which is called Exelon 5, which is 30 light years away. The humans are trying to occupy the new planet, but they discover another race living there. So the benefit of having a professionally designed cover is that when readers look at your book, that's the first thing they see. You really only have one opportunity to capture a reader's attention. So when you have that opportunity, you should have the best cover that you can possibly have. So a professionally designed cover is obviously better than one that you design yourself at home.
I'm very excited about the platform, about how wonderful the books look up there, and in particular my books are, 4 of them are actually got black and white illustrations throughout, and children, although they read a lot in print, they are increasingly reading on iPhones and on tablets, and I love the fact that Kobo will be able to put my books out into much wider markets than the ones that I can reach when I go into schools. So Walter Brown and the Magician's Hat I will be uploading this weekend, and it's out on May the 10th, and I'm just extremely excited to be able to get it to wider markets. So advice I would give to any children's writers who are independently publishing is be as professional as you can. First of all, know who your target market is, and test your book with children, with beta readers, with parents, librarians, and then once you're really happy with your story, obviously use a professional editor, check and recheck before you upload your book or indeed send it to print. It has to look as professional as it can, and of course use a professional cover designer and somebody who knows about children's books. And again, you can test your book with children's. If you're not sure about the cover, get their views on which one they prefer and indeed which title they prefer. And with my latest book, that's exactly what I did. And the children chose the title that I didn't think that they would prefer. So that really helped me.
Well, there's one novel so far called The Imagination Thief, and that's a little bit unusual in that the electronic format of it has got film and audio and photographic material embedded within the ebook format of it. But essentially it's a novel, it rests on the text, and then there are 4 novellas as well, The Platinum Raven and The Host in the Attic and Apricot Eyes and Hallucination in Hong Kong. And they share what are probably the same suite of characters. They are slightly metafictionally differentiated between the titles, but they're probably the same ones. And the origin of 6 of the main of those characters will be explored in an upcoming novel. All these titles are literary fiction, very much literary fiction in their DNA, but with a touch of magical realism and a dusting of horror.
I write Scottish historical fiction set in the Tudor period, and at the moment I've got 2 books out of a proposed trilogy. The main characters are fictional, but they're trapped in the middle of a historic feud between 2 of the Scottish clans. So in the first book, it's all about diverse loyalties and the pressures that living in conflict places on families, relationships, particularly personal integrity. Quite a roller coaster, quite a dramatic conclusion. Not a happy ending, but quite dramatic and quite appropriate. It opens with a massacre and it finishes with something very dramatic. Always expect that you need to do about 4 or 5 drafts before a book's ready for anybody to look at. And I'd also advocate getting professional editing and professional formatting, because whether you want to find a publisher or whether you want to do it yourself, you want it to be as good as it possibly can. A good editor's worth his weight in gold.
I'm the author of A Greater World, Korinji Flowers and Letters from a Patchwork Quilt. At the moment, I've just got A Greater World on Kobo, but I'm about to launch the other ones. I've got a new book coming out next month, which is called The Green Ribbons. All my novels are historical fiction, and they all deal with people who are displaced, who are taken out of a very cosy, comfortable life and forced into new and very difficult, challenging circumstances. Well, my top tip for writing is basically just to do it. People who talk about writer's block, I don't believe it exists. I think the only problem is not forcing yourself to sit there and do it. If you just sit down in front of the screen or an empty page and refuse to move until you've got the words out, then you'll get the words out.
My new release is The Finnish Girl, and it's coming out this Friday on the 15th of April. And it's a story, all my stories are set in Finland and Sweden. And this one is actually a prequel to a series of books which I've written called The Englishman. There are 2 other books in the series, but this, the prequel, tells a story of Kaisa when she's 15 and she meets a man 7 years her senior, 22, and she has a relationship with him. Now in the 70s it wasn't as shocking as it is now. But the story is still a story of control and controlling a young person. So it's quite a serious romance, but it's a romance all the same. All my books are based actually on true life, so they're all based on my life. And this book particularly was really, really hard to write because the subject is quite close to my heart. But I'm really pleased I've got it out, and I think it's actually the best book I've written. And I've written 5 others, so. My advice to new writers is the really basic advice: write, write and write. I actually have a series on my blog called helenahalme.com, and I have there a series called Advice for New Writers. It's assumed that writers know everything once they get into the self-publishing sphere, because there is so much advice online, and it's good to read all that advice, but sometimes it's good to go back to the basics and actually get that first book really, really perfect. I think it's really important that you go wide, and then you publish that one and you see how it goes, and then you think about paper copies and you think about the next book. But all the time when you're doing marketing, all the time when you're doing learning, you have to write, because that is the basic of being a writer. You have to continue writing, because otherwise you won't have any books to market and you won't have any problems with marketing, because if you don't have books, you can't market them.
I'm based in London in the UK, and I write lesbian romance and have been doing so for a couple of years now. I started off with my first book was London Calling, and that was quite a big hit. I wanted to write about lesbians that are in London because I'd read a lot of lesbian romance books, but they're all based in America. And so I decided that, hey, I could do that, just to base it in London. So that went down quite well. So I wrote a follow-up called This London Love, and that also went down well. And I'm doing a third book in the London series this year, and as yet untitled, but it'll definitely have London in the title. I think the biggest advice I'd have for anybody doing self-publishing is to deal with it professionally. I was quite lucky because I used to be a journalist and work in magazine publishing. I've done a lot of editing previously, but I also knew book editors. My friend's a graphic designer, he does my covers. I know someone who's a typesetter, so I fell on my feet a bit. But if you don't have that, you can get it done professionally, and it's a really big deal just to get professional covers and just to get your book looking and reading as great as it can.